Now, the middle schoolers I serve would say I'm becoming irrelevant and old, but I'm not.
Ideal Friday night? Silence.
Who are you with?
It's boring and I'm home alone with
Eating.
my family.
The camera angle has like 1,000 books behind you. Is your favorite book back there?
I like books. I buy them.
I like books. Why does Lincoln Berean, why do we need to be encouraged to not just sit there?
That's a good question. Hey, welcome to the Don't Just Sit There podcast. It's a podcast from Lincoln Berean Church. I'm Ryan Harmon, lead pastor here at Lincoln Berean Church, and this is...
I'm Aidan, Pauley. I serve as a middle school director in the youth ministry at Lincoln Berean.
All right, so that's what you do. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
I am married to my wife, Sophie. So insert picture of Sophie right here. I've been working here for about 2 years. I'm about to sneeze. Hold it. Ryan and I are very different. Hopefully you see our personalities come out. Maybe not fully. Ryan's older than me, and I would say I'm still young and hip. Now, the middle schoolers I serve would say I'm becoming irrelevant and old, but I'm not. So Ryan, you like listening to Handel's Messiah.
I do.
I didn't know what that was until I met you. I still haven't listened to it. You used to buy your songs one by one.
I used to buy songs. So Aidan always reminds me how old I am because he'll say things like, hold up, you bought a song? And I'll be like,
so
well, yeah.
Buy individual songs.
Yeah, of course.
I'd
I'd like to own them. I'd like to own the song. Yeah.
Which is, you write people, I text people.
That's right. Yeah. I'll say, hey, write them back. And you'll tell me,
like, I don't know what
you'll tell me that I'm ancient.
We both like Husker football. You love Husker football. You have some football. You played football in college? No, you almost did.
High school. Just high school.
You tried. Didn't you get
I tried.
pneumonia?
I had mono. Couldn't play high school. Couldn't play college
reason.
football. That's right.
Wheaton.
At Wheaton. Yeah. So I went to Wheaton.
Yep.
Wheaton College.
What's the mascot? Bulldogs?
When I went to Wheaton, they were the Crusaders.
Oh,
but that became inappropriate, and they changed to the worst mascot name of all time. They became the Wheaton Thunder. Okay. And isn't that horrible?
Did you have like a mascot?
You remember the XFL? Remember how embarrassing the XFL was?
Yeah.
That's like an XFL nickname.
Wheaton Thunder.
Mascot, the Thunder.
Why? Do you know why?
I don't know. Didn't like it, so I moved on. Moved on from Wheaton, and
no, you didn't.
I just mean that I graduated.
Yeah, you act like you left the school for a mascot.
I graduated. Married to Janae. My wife is Janae. Got 3 kids. My kids are 14, 10, and 8. Some of them are in your world. Your middle school and high school world. So
fun family.
We are really different.
Dog? You have a dog recently?
I have a dog. We named him Lincoln. Yep. We got him. We got him. So here's how this happened. My wife asked me one day, "Are you open to having a dog?" And I said, slightly open to this. And one day I drove home and thought, I wonder if I'm going to come home and find a dog. And I told that to my wife when I got home. There wasn't a dog, and I told that to her. And she said, well, you would have been livid, wouldn't you? You would have been so upset. And I should have said,
yes,
I would be so upset. You won't even believe how upset I would be. But what I said is, I don't know that I'd be that upset. And so 2 days later, I did come home to a dog. And many days I've looked back on that answer and I've thought I gave the wrong answer because now I have a dog.
But you love your dog. You like your dog.
I don't know that I'd go that far. We're growing on one another. We're learning how to live together. Yeah.
Give us your ideal Friday night. This is how different we are. Give us your ideal. It's this Friday.
Ideal Friday night. It's silence.
Who are you with?
It's boring, and I'm home alone with my family.
Did you get pizza by yourself?
Yeah, eating pizza. Oh, you're talking about in high school?
I think it hasn't changed. I still think you probably just want to be alone.
It probably hasn't changed.
You watch like Sound of Music.
In high school, I had friends. I didn't have any Christian friends in high school.
Really?
None. I had 2 that claimed to be Christians. And if they're watching, I doubt they're watching. If they are, I think they would admit that they were maybe cultural Christians. Yeah. They kind of gave me one night of the weekend, and then they went out with other friends or girlfriends or whatever and kind of partied on the other night of the week. So So my alone night of the weekend would be a movie from Family Video.
Oh, okay.
And I'd rent it, a VHS tape.
Okay.
Aidan.
Back in the 50s.
And I'd order a pizza. That'd be the night. Me watching movies alone. That's how depressing my life was.
I think I asked Ryan to hang out on a Friday night once, and he's like, "What do you want to do stuff on a Friday night?" It's like, it's Friday night, man. We gotta have fun. He's like, "I'm having pizza and watching The Sound of Music. If you want to come over." That never happened, but he probably does watch.
You know what? We just watched The Sound of Music.
I know. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah. Okay.
For fun.
Yeah, it's a great movie. Have you seen it?
Yes, but it's like you see it once, you're like, all right, I get it.
No, you need to see that movie more.
The best part, my Friday night is
my 8-year-old. By the way, my 8-year-old was very taken with Sound of Music. It was really strange. We can't get him to watch anything we want to watch.
Jacob was
all into it. I came down the next morning because they only watched half of it, and he had his tablet out secretively watching Sound of Music because we said we're going to finish it together as a family, but he went and found it and he was watching it. And I said, hey, you got to go back to the intermission. We're watching it tonight. So we finished it together, but he was having a hard time waiting. Yeah. Yeah. So favorite color, Aidan?
Red. Go big red.
Red. Okay.
I mean, I don't wear red. Just that's all I look best in black probably.
Okay.
Or dark brown like I'm wearing now.
All right. Mine's blue.
Cool. Like Creighton.
No. Best book you've ever read in your life. Most transformative book you've ever read in your entire life.
It's a tie. No, my name's Aidan. I was named after A.W. Tozer. Oh. My dad named me that. So The Knowledge of the Holy. I don't read. So I'm going to sound really spiritual when I say these books. I just don't read. So
you do read, but
I don't read Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings.
Well, I know that.
Waste my time with
So
fiction.
Knowledge of the Holy.
That, I see Divine Conspiracy by Dallas Willard.
Okay.
As much as it's confused, it is just, I'll get into that more and more. Just refreshing. Great book. I don't read any other books besides. I just don't like reading.
Huh.
You read. There's the camera angle has 1,000 books behind you. Is your favorite book back there?
I like books. I buy them.
I like books.
I like books. I like books. I buy too many books. Probably for me, Mere Christianity. I'd say that'd be the book that was pretty formative.
You need more. Do you listen to podcasts?
Once in a while. But the reason we're doing a podcast is because we did. Podcasts are great at kind of providing a venue to have different conversations that go a little further, maybe than you can in a typical classroom setting or maybe on a Sunday morning message. An opportunity to have conversation, to go into maybe nuance and some topics and some depth of topics that you can't quite go into in other settings. So our hope is that doing a podcast is going to provide us with the opportunity to have different kinds of conversation than we generally could. I don't know. Have you done a podcast before?
I have my own podcast, actually.
You do?
No, I don't. I tried releasing it. It was part of me was like, man, everyone has a podcast. And then you kind of realize that just seems to be one of the primary ways people consume information in a good way. It's as much as I feel like part of me was like, man, every church has a podcast. And yet you look at the culture, it just seems like you said, there's so many podcasts because I think they're convenient, they're helpful, they allow spaces to get into more in detail on certain things that, you can't talk from stage, or that we have a class at Berean, or not everybody's in youth ministry. So if we're talking about certain topics in youth ministry, older people aren't walking in that room. So this just provides a space where, younger audiences, the older audiences can consume, can learn, can grow through this format. So it's exciting.
I mean, I think the main point is really just, we all live our faith day to day. But there are a lot of things that come up that are difficult or curious or require some thoughtfulness, and you have to create spaces to have those conversations, and that's what this is. So regardless of your circumstance, regardless of your age, so this podcast isn't going to be like a rehashing of what we talked about on the weekend. It's not going to be that kind of thing. This is going to be an opportunity to go into some depth about things that really matter to us, and we think should matter to who we are as a church, as pastors, but most of all, as just followers of Jesus. So,
have we said the name yet?
No, we haven't. So I was about to get into that.
Okay.
So what's our name?
Well, the acronym is DJTS.
Good.
No.
Thanks for
not that.
telling us the acronym.
It's called Don't Just Sit There podcast.
Don't
just sit there.
Yeah, don't just sit there. So we're called to be active in our faith. And so, in a moment where even it's interesting, like a lot of church things are happening on streaming platforms, and some churches are really leaning into that, and it's like, hey, you can sit in your PJs, you can sit at home, you can watch church. But ultimately, every church, including us, are trying to challenge people to take up the call to follow Jesus wherever they are, right? And that requires that we move. And so don't just sit there as this call, essentially this call, this cry, whatever you want to call it, to be actively engaged in following Jesus, not just to sit back. And we can talk more about that as we go along.
Because you've been in ministry longer than I have. Someone could hear this and be like, well, shouldn't we assume that those who are walking with Christ, who call themselves Christians, are actively living it out? Like, why? This seems more like a command of like, hey, we're calling something that may not be happening, or try to encourage something that maybe isn't as present or prevalent in our culture now. Like, why does Lincoln Berean, why do we need to be encouraged to not just sit there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my personal conviction is there are Christians who are confused about this dynamic tension between God does everything. God does the whole work, let's say. And so that includes things like growing and impacting the world and those kind of things. But then on the other side, you have this sense that I know God does it, but somehow I'm called to be engaged in it. And I don't know that there are too many Christians that think they can just sit there, but I think that the call is essentially to sort that out a little bit, to dig into that. Where does my responsibility begin and end? Where does God's responsibility begin and end? And so I don't think there are a lot of people that think that their call in their faith is just to sit there like a, bump on a log or something. But ultimately, I do think there's a lot of confusion about, if I start to do something, does that mean I'm trying to earn from God? Does that mean I'm trying to gain favor from him, or that he'll like me more? And, we reject all of that, but then it also, I think, makes people feel a little paralyzed, like they aren't sure exactly what to do.
Right.
And so
what do you think in terms of like how we understand the gospel plays into that? Like, I remember it was like 10 years ago, I was sitting at a Hy-Vee with my friend. We just got done with lifeguard training. We're eating Hy-Vee Chinese, which has gone downhill. But we're sitting there, we're talking, and he says, I think at the time I was a Christian. I don't know what sparked the conversation, but he wasn't super, I think I was curious about his faith. And I was like, what do you believe? Knowing that I think we grew up in a small town, we kind of knew everything about each other, and it seemed like his life maybe didn't line up with what he believed. So I was kind of poking at that, and he said something to me. He's like, I'll focus on my faith when I get older. I'll worry about that when I get older.
why did he say that? What did it mean when he said, I'll focus on my faith?
It felt like to him, it was saying the Christian life is boring, and I can do it when I get older. I want to have fun now. Which goes back to like, and at that time I didn't have an answer. I was like, that's a good point. Like, what if the gospel, again, so that's why I'm asking about this understanding of the gospel. If our understanding of the gospel is something that doesn't naturally cause us to not just sit there, but actually get up and live actively, you wonder how much of what we're teaching is a problem. So I just wondered, like, looking back at that now, I have more of an idea of what I would say back to my buddy named Brett. But at the time I was like, yeah, that's a good point. So then almost his belief of the gospel was, you just believe something and that's it. And I'll believe it when I get older. My life will not change at all, which feeds this. I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to consume what I'm going to consume. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to get in heaven when I die. Just wonder how much the gospel presentation plays into that.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot. Not only the gospel presentation, but I think also just what people think life with God is all about.
Mm-hmm.
or life with Jesus is all about, right? And if it is purely a restriction on your capacity to have fun, then you can see why a lot of people are like, I'll put that off until the last possible moment. Now, there's a flaw in that thinking because you never know when the last possible moment will be.
Right.
But even if you did know, I think the larger question is that a good way to live life? Or maybe is your definition of fun just out of whack and you need to reconsider it? So I think there's that. I think the other question is, to me, the biggest question is, how do we conceive of growth, growing up in Christ or maturing in our faith? How does that happen? Is that something that kind of happens a little bit like we're struck by lightning, this lightning of grace, God will just do it? Or is there some active participation that we have in the process?
Yeah, like what's our expectation in terms of become a Christian? Like now what? Like what does the expectation for life with Christ look like?
Yeah, and I personally think there are a lot of, I believe there are a lot of frustrated Christians that are frustrated with a feeling of stagnation. They are frustrated with a feeling of they're just not quite sure how to grow. Maybe they're stuck in cycles of sin, or they have an addiction, and those are complex things. Not saying we're gonna like solve that necessarily in one 30-minute, 40-minute podcast. But I think sometimes they don't necessarily feel like the church, any church, is offering them much insight as to actually how they can grow. And if they get up off the couch, let's say, if they don't just sit there, what do you do if you don't just sit there? When you get active, what exactly do you do? Does that mean you need to take up the call and be a missionary? And that's what we mean by don't just sit there. We need to talk about all that kind of stuff because I think there's confusion about that.
Yeah, because what I hear is don't just sit there. If I'm a Christian, I hear, oh my gosh, I don't have another podcast, another do more message. Do more. And it's like, dude, we need to tithe more. Yeah. We need to give more. We need to serve more. And I think, if that's what we're teaching, then it's like, that's going to be exhausting. But we're not saying get off. What is the podcast called? Don't just sit there.
Come on.
I need the brand. I need like a title slide. DJTS. Don't worry about the acronym. It helps my brain.
Release the need to say the acronym.
So if I hear don't just sit there, just do more. The Mamba mentality,
right?
Like just grind, do more. That's Kobe Bryant.
Yeah, but I think that's true.
I think that could be exhausting for someone here. It's like, seriously, more. Like if you're saying it's right, where there's just a confusing, frustrating Christian life all of us are living. To do more just sounds like, okay, so be more frustrated then, because I'm going to try to do more. And it's going to be so hard. It's going to be so exhausting. I'm going to keep failing. My heart's not in this stuff. Like it just could be a turnoff almost of like,
it'd be exhausting.
If that's all the Christian life is, just doing more. It's like,
it'll be exhausting.
So what do we mean by doing more? You already hit on it, but like, I feel like we come in with bias. I feel like you come in and we could say this is what we mean. But one more time, like when we say don't just sit there, what are we calling them into? What are we inviting each other, the church, listeners into?
Right. Active engagement in the process of growth.
Active engagement in the process of growth.
Yeah.
Okay. That needs that.
You got to think about that a little bit.
Phrase it a different way.
So as we move into 2025, one of the things that we said in 2024, and we're going to continue to say in 2025 as a church, is that we want to be about helping people grow and multiply, right? We're talking about helping them become more like Jesus, and then helping them help others do the same, or essentially take up this call to let the world know who Jesus is and to take up the call to follow him. So the question is, how are those kind of things going to happen? If we just sit there, if I do nothing, is that going to happen? And my answer to that would be, well, God can do that. But generally, he doesn't do that. Generally, God comes, and as I come to him, submit myself to him, even do something as basic as open his word and pour over it and think about it and meditate on it and consider it. He starts to work, but I've done something there. I haven't just sat there.
It's like a partnership to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, it's a partnership, I guess you could say. But I think as we think about growth and multiplication in the year 2025 at Lincoln Berean Church, the question is, how do we wisely, in a gracious and grace-filled way, how do we actively participate in the process of growing, of becoming more like Jesus, and in the process of multiplying, of helping other people come to know him as well? And it seems like Christians, we are inclined to either go to one of two extremes. Either we say, you know what, there's nothing I can do, and so we kind of do nothing.
Like this is the Christian life.
Yeah, or we just get passive and we say that's God's job, not mine. I don't want to fall into earning things. Really good concern. I don't want to fall into earning things, so I better not do anything. And I'd say we almost get paralyzed by this fear of earning, because if I do something, then it feels like I'm earning. Mm-hmm. That's one extreme. The other extreme is to take it all on ourselves and say, hey, my job, because I'm a Christian now, is to work my tail off and make stuff happen. And most of the time that leads to weariness and burnout, because that's not it either. So the question is, where's this middle kind of tension point where I act, but I don't trust my actions. I trust the grace of God. I trust the Spirit of God. And that's what I think each episode throughout the year is going to touch on, that in some way, shape, or form at some point, you know? And so to me, it's having a extended conversation about that, because I believe a number of Christians just wrestle with this, and they long to grow, but they aren't quite sure how. And we want to talk about that
again. So like, and if I'm, what's the phrase? When you're hitting the same point over and over again. What's that phrase?
Beating a dead horse.
Yeah, I wonder where that comes from. Beating a dead horse. Like is the
that'll
horse,
be next time.
We're gonna
talk about the origins of the phrase beating a dead horse.
Who beats a dead horse?
Someone who
is it like when it's right?
There's larger problems.
It's like True Grit when the horse is dying, or like it's so tired and he just stabs it to make it.
I don't know.
Great movie, sad scene. So like beating a dead horse. When I hear grow, my mind still might jump to do more. Like I need to grow, so I need to be nicer. I need to be a better server. I need to open the door for people. And when we say growth, we don't mean necessarily external. That certainly is part of it. We mean a inward transformation.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why in our vision statement that we launched years ago, we talked about knowing Jesus and becoming more like him, right? It's this idea of becoming more like him. And what we mean when we say becoming more like him is actually our character, who we are, not just what we do, but who we are is actually, by the grace of God, by the Spirit of God, being changed, being transformed. And it's taking on his likeness more and more and more. The process is going to be an entire lifetime, but there's progression in that throughout our life, where our hope is that we could say 2 years from now, people notice, like there's more, take on a quality of Christ. There's just more peace that I exude. And that's not because I'm trying really hard to exude peace. It's because Jesus is doing an internal work in me.
Yeah.
And the question is, can we be intentional about that? Can I go to him and say, Jesus, I am lacking peace. And I want to know, when you say, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives do I give. When you say that, I long for that. Can you help me know how to step actively into this process of actually coming to know and live in and experience your very peace? I think all of us hear Jesus say that, and we want that so bad.
Right.
But I think the question is, but how do I do that? What's that look like? And that's when we say don't just sit there. There are things we can do, not to bring about the outcome we want, but to draw near to Jesus and bring our lives before him, bring our heart before him, such that he can do the work that we deeply long for, bring about transformation of our very internal person, right? Our character.
Do you feel like, again, to go from, here's what we want, like it sounds like you, and we know this, but sounds like you're talking from experience. Do you look at your life and go, because a lot of your story you shared a couple months ago, this frustration of like, I just feel like I'm not experiencing the full life. As you look at your life and you talk about maybe there's some things about your life that are now different or things that you're experiencing more you weren't before. Can you like give us a little bit of I'm sure we'll go more into a future podcast, just a little bit of okay, Ryan and Aidan are saying all these things. What does it actually look like? And then, Ryan was like this and now he's like this. Like that sounds pretty enticing.
Yeah. I mean, that would be, we could talk about that, I think, more in the months to come. But I'm by nature, I've been a pretty anxious person, and I really do feel like the Lord has freed me from a lot of that anxiety. I think that's been a huge thing. I'm kind of a warrior. I'm not a huge risk taker, but there's things where I do look and I'm like, man, it's amazing to me that somehow God worked in my life in such a way that my wife and I moved to Madrid, Spain. I mean, there are things where I'm like, that's God. That's not me muscling my way into some new reality. Mm-hmm. That's just God doing a work. Back in August of 2024, what we talked about, or what I talked about from the stage, is this idea of John 10:10. I always say this is the verse that haunted me, and the reason I say haunted, I just couldn't escape it, and I couldn't figure out what it meant. So John 10:10 is, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, but I came that they may have life and have it in abundance, or have it to the full, or have it abundantly, just depending on the translation you read. And I was on this search for a number of years. Like, what does that mean? What is life to the full? Well, that was my search. What I thought is, it's clearly great. Life to the full, abundant life is clearly great. Anything good in abundance is a good thing, right? Like, we're all very happy when we're living in abundance. So I would go around, I'd ask different believers, just people I was close to, when I was working at a Christian camp, when I was working at a Christian school, or going to a Christian school. And invariably, every single person, when I asked them, what did Jesus mean when he says, I came that they may have life and life to the full? What does that mean? Every single Christian I talked to said, forgiveness of sins so that you go to heaven when you die. This was my wrestle, because it seemed to me, and it seems to me, that he's talking about a different quality of life now that he's offering. Yeah. That will extend, of course, into the future. And that is absolutely inclusive of forgiveness and eternal bliss in heaven, and then the new heavens and new earth. That's included. But it seems to me like he's also talking about something is going to change now in terms of your quality of life. And it's going to be my very life. And that's something I had to wrestle with. Did Jesus live an abundant life? And I think the answer is like, absolutely, Jesus lived an abundant life. And so that began this search for me of what does it mean? And I think it comes down to, there is a different quality of life that Jesus is offering us, and it's his very life. And that includes forgiveness. That includes heaven when we die. Absolutely. But it also starts now, and it's something that we can take up with him now. And so that was the formative moment of my Christian life, right? After being saved, there was this moment of tension that led to, I think, a deeper understanding of the life that Jesus offers now that we get to step into.
So then from that better understanding of John 10:10, did that lead you to look at your life and go, wow, there is a better life to live? And then look at like things like anxiety and go, I just think that's not what God has for me. Or I think God invites me to bring some transformation in that area, or for him to work in that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it's not overnight. It's not immediate. Right. But I think maybe there was a mental shift of moving from thinking, all right, this is just my state. This is who I am. And, I just gotta deal with it and kind of grin and bear it through gritted teeth until I die. And then things get better. There's a lot of hold on, and then things will get better. Going back to your friend, it's this idea that There's an alternative life that is the way of the world that probably would be better and easier, but it results in hell and separation from God. So it's not good. So I don't want that. And so what I had to take on was this life that wasn't all that satisfying, but it has
heaven at the end,
a glorious future.
Yeah.
I had to have a shift where I understood actually participation in the ways of the world is foolishness. It is not life. It is not fun. And the life that Jesus offers now is a life that leads to flourishing and fullness and goodness and joy and abundance. So I had to have a shift again. That begins this process of dealing with things like worry, and you got to start to dig into, well, why do I worry? Worry comes from believing the world is unsafe. And Jesus comes and says things and kind of operated himself, even though the world was very unsafe to him. It seems as though he operated free from worry. And so what did he believe that allowed him to do that? What reality did he live in that allowed him to do that? And what am I missing maybe in terms of understanding what he now offers me through his very life, So,
well, that's what sometimes I almost think the don't just sit there call is almost like a relief, because I feel like there's a lot of Christians in our city, in our world, that I don't know if it's an escapism mindset where it's like, my life is miserable. One day it won't be. And there's truth to that. There is a reality that we live in a broken world, that we are groaning for the resurrection of our bodies. And yet there's, like you said, I think Jesus is right about John 10. If he actually was not being metaphorical, he was saying there's a life I can offer you that is full. Then there's something about where it's like, when we say don't just sit there, it's not just do more, be better. It's no, there's a life that's better for you that you could live. And you could look at these struggles you have, this anxiety you have, this depression, this anger you have towards your kids, your family, these, even like it's a new year and we want to have all these goals. And I just, I'm trying to be better in these areas, and then it lasts till February 6th, then it's over. And don't just sit there podcast is almost I would say, like, for me, for sure, like a beacon of light where it's like, oh, there's a better way to live. There's hope that, yes, there is a reality that we live in a broken world, and that one day with Jesus, life will be perfect. And yet there's a life with Jesus now that can improve my, not situation necessarily, but yet internally that helps me engage with situations differently. And so I feel like for the Christian who just is sitting there saying, this is my cross to bear. And there's truth to some things, and this is just what I have to get through, and one day I'll be in heaven, everything will be perfect. It's just almost like, no, you can experience some freedom, some hope, some life with God now that you only thought was maybe in heaven or in the new earth kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think, this whole conversation started with, why did we name it what we named it? I guess a question is, if I just sit there, if I do nothing, will I grow? My answer would be, I don't think so. Now, God being who he is, God can still come in and intervene. That's absolutely 100% true. Part of what we're talking about when we're talking about growth, though, is not just what can God do, but what does God prefer to do, and what does he typically do? If I never open my Bible, can God still cause growth in me? Well, God can, but is that a good strategy for growth? It's a horrible strategy for growth. And so how do I understand that there is this dynamic? If I do nothing, that's probably going to result in very minimal growth. But how do I do something without thinking I'm earning things from God? Mm-hmm. Right? Because grace is opposed to earning. Mm-hmm. Same thing with multiplication. If I never talk to a neighbor in my life, will they come to know the gospel? Well, God has innumerable resources, and he can bring a different neighbor. But God typically is going to use someone coming and proclaiming the truth, Yeah. And that person, whoever that person is that comes and proclaims the truth, is operating with a conviction that we we're going to do something, but we're not going to trust our something. We're going to trust that the Spirit of God is going to move. So the thing that I think we want to acknowledge in the podcast is that that's a dynamic that is easy to get. It's easy to get a little bit out of alignment on that. It's easy to start to, right, in our church environment, we're very concerned about legalism, which absolutely we should be concerned about legalism. But what we don't want to do is be so concerned about legalism that we become paralyzed and we say, well, okay, I'm just not going to do anything, you know? So I think that's the tension that the name of the podcast is trying to prompt us to talk about.
Yeah.
But that's it.
That's it.
That's it.
This is our one recording.
It's a good conversation.
Yeah.
It's good to be with you.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Pastor.
Enjoy you.
Thank you.
So how's this going to work?
Yeah.
Right. So we're kind of wading into this podcast space, and
This is new for us.
probably important to say, like, this isn't for us. Like, this isn't for us. This isn't like we do this. We're doing this to help.
Mm-hmm.
We want this to be helpful. We want this to be a conversation that's meaningful, or it spurs thinking, it spurs growth, and so we're doing this for those people who want to listen. And so this podcast is going to be the best if we get feedback and questions and input from those who really are using it as a way to help them grow. So the way the format's going to go is we're going to have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while, we'll bring different people in. We'll have a conversation with them about this idea of growth, about multiplication, about following after Jesus. Then 2 weeks later, or at some interval of time later, we'll have a Q&A. We'll gather questions. We'll gather insights or comments, and we'll just talk about those. And so that's where I'm saying it'd be the best if you are listening and you're finding this helpful, if you'd send us in questions. That'd be really helpful to us. So the place you can do that is just via email. The email address, not the web address. Sorry. I just said web. That made me sound old again.
Internet.
The internet, the World Wide Web. The World Wide
mail
WWW. So don't just sit there, P-O-D, at lincolnberean.org.
You can't have spaces in the email.
No, you can't have spaces. No apostrophe, though. No apostrophe, just D-O-N-T.
Don't just
sit there, pod at lincolnberean.org. So that's a way that we can gather questions, and that's going to make this way more dynamic and way more interesting, to be honest. We want to talk about the things that are concerning or maybe confusing to you. One of my favorite things that I get to do with the youth group is when you guys invite me in or other people in, Mark Mathewson from time to time, just to have open Q&A. And man, sometimes the high schoolers, they come after me.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a blast, right? Because that's the real stuff. And so we'd encourage you in the same way. This is going to be a more dynamic thing. If you send us real questions that you're really wrestling with, you can also send us funny or quirky questions that you would like to know about. You can ask Aidan about why he thinks he looks better in black
and dark brown.
Makes
me look tan.
Those kind of things. It makes you look tan. So you can for sure do that. And finally, again, this is intended to be a helpful resource. And so we're not going to do what people typically do on podcasts, where they rattle off
like, subscribe, share, comment.
Right. Here's what we would say. If this is helpful, share it with someone you think it'd be helpful with. That's helpful to us, but ultimately the point of that is not to grow numbers on our end. We don't care. If this is not helpful to people, we'll stop doing it tomorrow.
Yeah.
But if this is helpful, we want it to be helpful to those that we love, we care about, and we're trying to walk out this life in Christ together with. So if that's you, we'd encourage you to let us know. Thanks. I think that's it, Aidan.
Thanks, guys.
Great.
You got kind of serious in this conversation.
I did try to say I don't want to be. I feel like I'm just this funny guy. I'm trying to unlock something.
No, it's good. I mean, you weren't funny at all.